Okay. Might leave it another minute and we'll make a start. And we'll try to stick tightly to the hour. So that will leave us about, I think, roughly 20 minutes per presentation. And if we leave about 10 minutes for discussion, that should work pretty well. Well, why don't we start? Welcome to our lightning talks for this week. We have one of our colleagues, Associate Professor Sue Watman, presenting, and a visiting scholar, Associate Professor Ove Osterlie, from Norway. We have loosely related presentations today. I'd like to start, though, with an acknowledgement of country, and I'm very glad that we make these acknowledgements, and I'm glad as well that the federal election in a way reflects the respect for First Nations people. I'm sitting here at Brisbane South Nathan campus at the moment, and that campus is situated on the unceded lands of the Yagara, Jagera and Turrbal peoples. I'd like to extend respect to elders past and present, and to all Indigenous colleagues joining us today. So with that, I'll hand over first to you, Ovi, around 20 minutes, and then we'll have some discussion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Steve, for the introduction, and I also support your acknowledgements of your First Nations, as you do on these occasions, and it's a very nice to see the support given on different levels in society and also in academia. So I really support that as well. What I'm gonna present in a moment, one of the projects I'm working on while here as a visiting scholar at the Griffith, but I also wanted to extend my gratitude and thank you for being able to be here as a visiting scholar. This what is our academic year in Europe, and it's coming to an end at the end of June. We are moving back to Norway, and I've been here since August last year. So it's been an incredible experience, both personally for my whole family, children and everything. It was a big step to move so far away from where we normally live. Can't come much further away from home, actually. But also professionally, it's been very interesting, enlightening. I've learned a lot, and it's been a very good time for me, academically and professionally, with the system we have of these sabbatical years that we can really dedicate the whole of our time to projects like this. And also thank you so much to Sue for agreeing to be a part of this project now over 2 years ago. And it's you see the title of the project on the bottom of this slide, and it is about the use of digital technology in our field of higher education. And this project, or this part that I'm gonna talk about now, is what we started with, and that was a scoping review of the use of digital technology in PEAT. And also we have some of my colleagues back at NTNU, Geir Olav and Stephen. They were part of this work, and also Dr. Maria Jose Camacho Miñano from the Complutense University in Madrid has also been part of this journey, alongside Sue from Griffith. So we wanted to see as a background for what we have also been working on while I've been here, and that's the development of online courses, and that's something Sue's going to talk a bit more about. when I round up this one. But we wanted as a solid background to get some knowledge on the present use of digital technology within our field of work in teacher education, and that was to see what kind of digital technology is used, and also to include what are the perceptions of this uses, both from the student perspective, but also from the staff and institutional perspectives. So we decided to do a scoping review to get a more solid foundation for actually developing new courses. So the objectives were to, as normally in these scoping reviews, is to get the scope of the present use, and that it includes what kind of characteristics are present in the included studies. And then we did a distinction between the digital technologies used as what we could call mere tools in PEAT, but also how are digital technologies used within pedagogical frameworks or pedagogical approaches in PEAT, and also how these uses were perceived among students and staff. So we started with these research questions to guide our scoping review. And the methodology we relied on were the Prisma framework, and especially the framework developed for scoping reviews. Before we started, we registered in the OSF system so that other researchers could be aware of work we were doing, but also that we could inform ourselves and try to avoid doing work that was already being undertaken. And we used the Covidence online tool to do the scoping review. And we found that particularly useful, as I was then working from Norway. We had people in Spain working on this, and also Sue here in Australia. So due to the time differences, it was very useful to use this online tool. And not only for that, it's also a very useful tool to really be able to cooperate well when reviewing such amount of literature. And it's also to get a rigorous and ethical sound process and research. These tools depends on how you set them up, but for example, we had that every step were always controlled by two researchers, like the pre-screening and the reading and the reporting and extraction of data is always handled by a minimum of two researchers to enhance the rigorousness and the trustworthiness of the work. So Covidence is one of many tools, but I were able to use that through my university, and we found that a very useful tool. It also helps on the reporting to generate tables like flow charts and stuff. So, and these were the databases we used in our searches. And I also had from our faculty library staff, they helped us quality assure the search strings used and also the databases used. And these databases, through my library service, we had access to those. We of course set out some from criteria for what to include and not, and was recent studies from 2010 until 2023, which was the year the initial searches were done. So the whole process took about 2 years from we started the project until publication, which seems like a very long time, but in my experience, that's kind of a normal time span for a large review study like this. Yeah, so these were the criteria. So we tried to assess, like you could call it, the depth or the amount of use of digital technology. We wanted it to be studies that intentionally or relied on the use of digital technology and not merely just mentioning the use of it as part of a coursework, but had to be on some kind of level embedded and had a purpose into the courses or the work. So these criteria guided us, and that made us include, in the end, 41 studies, where we started out from the searches with 1,070. And some of them were removed. And that's also a good thing about using the Providence tool. It helps you identify duplications, for example. And we could also, through that tool, store PDFs of the document so that we had everything stored and it was accessible to all of us that was working on this project. But we had to screen 768 on abstract level. And then we chose from that 132, and then from those excluded 91 when looking into full text documents. And in the end, we included 41 studies into the review. Regarding the results, the characteristics, like country, year, and participants, this map with the circles indicates the amount of studies from different parts of the world. This can also be a starting point for other discussions around knowledge in higher education as well, and those reviews where you can see, like, on what basis are we trying to define what is true or what is knowledge in a world where you see that what parts of the world represents those studies that we base our assumptions on. So we can see, like, South America is not present, Africa is not present, and Asia is not very present. So of course that has something to do with the criteria of inclusion, both from databases and language. But that is another discussion that one can draw maybe more on a general basis on review work on review studies. But as you see, the American and Australian and European are countries and parts of the world that has informed these studies. These are the years of publication, and naturally the last years have the more numbers of studies, and especially in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, where both academics had more time to publish, but it also really boosted the use of digital technology in higher education. So most of the studies are in the recent 5 years. Methodologically, we found most studies to have a qualitative approach, followed by quantitative and mixed methodology approaches. And the study level was the majority from undergraduate, and some from graduate, and some were not specified in the reports. And that is also natural to a lot of career opportunities to go into teaching PE in school are on bachelor levels. So in summary, we could see that the studies are ranged from US and Australia, and also Europe. Yeah, that's on the methodology. So then we looked into how digital technologies are used as tools, and we had to define what is a tool and what is a more pedagogical use of digital technology. And this is something that we also discuss in the paper, how to distinct one from another, as the boundaries here are not very clear, especially when reported in studies, as a lot of these studies haven't made that distinction themselves. So that's our interpretation. We have interpreted it as use of as a tool or use in a pedagogical setting or framework. But as tools, it was typically, the most typically was the use of video recordings, either of students recording themselves for assessment or recordings done in school. It was use of podcasts and social media applications, and also other tools and applications, but to a less extent. So definitely the most common use of digital technology was video recordings. And when we saw how this was used as more within pedagogical frameworks, digital technology was used to a large extent as online courses, also blended learning or flipped learning, or flipped classroom, named by some studies, and also the approach of gamification. So in summary, recordings is the most used tools, and the podcasts were the least reported. And as pedagogy, we used, yeah, as you can see, so online teaching was, or distant teaching was the most frequent use, and gamification the lesser used. So into the perceptions, we found a lot of similarities across the use, but typically within digital technology used as a tool, they yield positive outcomes to a greater extent than negative perceptions, and it was typically connected to motivation, effectiveness, reflection, or general perceptions. So we didn't really see some perceptions used more across. It was generally connected to those like motivation or effectiveness, but it's hard to see like a systematic use of tools, or for example motivational approaches or theories applied. It was a very variety of reporting of outcomes, or when it comes to perceptions. But maybe the most used is that some kind of measurement of motivation, from statistically used, quantitatively used, from validated measurement instruments like self-determinational theories. We have some measurements, but also a lot from qualitative works. And then the report tends to more general positive perceptions of use. But also some negative impacts were reported, and that could, for example, be on feedback quality. And that was typically within this use of recordings, that the reports of that. But also other tools were reported, for example, that it helped communication. Regarding the perceptions on online feed, which is within the digital technology as pedagogy, it also were often connected to motivation and effectiveness. But also some negative perceptions were reported, like writing skills and technical issues that could hamper the effective use of online feeds. And also within blended and flipped learning environments, often connected to motivation, to learning, and also to more autonomy aspects. but also heard that time consumption and workload was negative perceptions. So we have some conclusions in this paper that we have advancements within the use, but we also see there is no conformity or like a common direction. The studies really are going in very different directions and there is not very much common directions within this field. So we hope that this scoping review can help us, especially to guide some further studies that we see we have some lacks, and that is especially connected to the interventions time span. They were often very short. So there is a need of more long-term impact studies on the use of digital technology, and also to address different equity concerns and the strategies for integration. And that is also something that we saw. Some of these studies, they do use and they do report, but they do not really go into discussions on the so what, like implications for these programs. They more or less report on what they found. So that is something that's also missing from current literature. And also we saw that most of the reports on perceptions are from a student perspective, but we really need studies looking into how staff and teachers perceive the use of digital technology to help us build courses, as Sue's going to talk about as well. So these are gaps that needs to be addressed according to our scoping review. Yes, these were just some of these references. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ove. Well, could people offer up any questions at this point? There's time. There's a little bit of time for discussion. I'm just monitoring the chat column, but perhaps while we're waiting for people to think of questions, Ove, coming to this presentation, I was wondering how a move to digital technologies would affect a subject like HPE, which has that, I mean, to an outsider, a very strong physical or embodied dimension. And so I was wondering, did anything come up from your study on about challenges of moving to digital technologies for a subject like HPE, or how those kinds of challenges might have been overcome? Did it come up at all?
Well, it didn't come up particularly as a contradiction to the embodiedness of PE and PET, but you can interpret it from that time consumption is an issue, that this takes time from something else. And also my experience when introducing and having workshops on the use of digital technology, as one of those challenges might be that digital technology in general is perceived something contradictory to the purpose of PE. But I find that less among students and maybe more along in-service teachers. So I also think that's the paradigm that's been changing over the last years, that we don't really have to struggle with the use of digital technology, but at least not among our students and newly introduced in-service teacher. They are very well aware of that digital technology can be a good addition or a good approach, and it doesn't really extend into sedentary behavior or something, but it can be a useful tool. So yeah, maybe you can comment on that, Sue, as well, but I think that's something that's been changing maybe over the last 5-10 years, that it's not very much an issue anymore.
Okay.
But it didn't come it didn't really stick out in the data other than maybe technical issues and time consumption. Yeah.
And really, technology use in HPE has been there for a long time. So technology use in HPE is not something that there's pushback from the profession about. It's the removing of the social from and relationality through online teaching. That was one problem. And also that part of the learning in HPE is they have the phrase called in, through and about movement. So online learning has really pushed it to be about learning about the discipline and the area and not learning in and through. So the ability to feel, reflect, that part of it has had to have a real serious rethink with online delivery of HPE. And that's the part I think that a lot more of the profession is grappling with. But certainly the idea that like using video, using different means of measurement has long been taken up in HPE. And certainly the whole profession has been quite quick to get on board and say, oh, here's how we're using technology in HPE. Like, so to say is a positive expression of the profession, but what we haven't really written about and what Ove is saying is not there in the literature is us now problematizing and saying, here's what's not serving our profession really well. And I think that those two things, the removal of being with people, like, you know, when you're moving and when you're thinking about moving and reflecting upon moving, it's usually with people. So removing that aspect of it has been problematic. And I know certainly from my point of view of trying to think about how to finish off graduates here when they're in places all over the place and not actually together has always been a problem for me. I remember speaking to Jason about how am I going to do online canoeing? And he says, oh, there's a couple of good websites and a couple of places you can go looking and you can use virtual reality headsets. And we did actually get them for a class a couple of years ago, the VR headsets and some of these canoeing things. But I think we didn't end up doing it, Jason. We ended up doing something like spending time on the assignment. But anyway, that was a step too far for me that year. And then we got back to real canoeing. So no substitute.
Sure. Okay, thanks very much, Sue. Louise has put a question, into the chat. She says, I know the study was up to 2022, but wondering if you have some observations or research directions now about how AI or Gen AI might be infiltrating the technology space for PTE.
Yeah, and that's also something that we drew from this study, that none of the studies included that perspective of artificial intelligence in our scoping. But the latter years, from the year after 23 and until now, several studies have come out on the use of IA, especially within PET, but also within the physical education in school. So there are several studies, and we also in the thinking of another project where also Sue is included on the use of artificial intelligence in higher education within the more practical and aesthetical subjects, where we see that field of higher education is maybe not left behind, but that there are some values and perspectives from these kind of subjects that needs to be lifted up and looked at when applying that sort of view. So yeah, that it's an interesting question, and it's also a timely question.
Yes. Now, I'm keen to move on to Sue's presentation, but just want to look at a couple of questions very quickly. Poppy's asked a question, and Poppy, this is kind of on my mind as well. Thanks for sharing your study, she says. Just curious to understand what makes PETE a particularly interesting or unique environment for studying digital technology integration.
It might have to do that. It's been maybe not so much now, but until recently seen as a contradiction, or the use of digital technology within that environment has not been seen useful, and hence also it's not been, nobody's giving attention to it. So it's been very little research within that compared to other subjects, and also politically, on political levels, it's not been lifted up as a viable approach, the use of digital technology. But of course, from my background, that's as a PE teacher and a PE academic, it's been my field of work the last decade. So